Hello, this is a guide on how to do the term paper in Drugs and Human Behavior. A couple of things to know. Most importantly, as I've mentioned in class, I'm sure by now, you can look for information on how to do this paper in the syllabus. The syllabus is going to have important deadlines. And also on D2L, where we've got two guides. One is a very extensive guide on how to do the paper, and the other is a guide that I've put together on how to go to the library's website and get some sources for your paper. So that's an important thing. The other thing, as I say, is don't be a stranger. Stay in touch with me. Send me emails, bounce ideas off of me, show me some advertisements that you find. Because this paper might be a little different than some other places, than some other papers that you've done for other classes. Basically, the purpose of this, it's not a long paper, but it's to briefly evaluate an advertisement about a drug using an article, an actual scientific article. Some people, not everybody, may not have actually looked at a real scientific, what we call primary source, peer-reviewed journal article before. So that's what we're going to do with this. That's the main point of the paper. So the advertisement, so I'm going to use those two terms, the ad and the article. Let's talk about the ad first. The ad can be an advertisement in any medium. I don't care if it's online, if it's a TV commercial, whatever. The thing is, it must be intended for public consumption. In other words, it's got to be something that the average public, where the average public is the intended audience, the average person, someone who maybe doesn't know a whole lot about drugs or medicine or how we test and regulate these things. The other thing about it is it's got to be about a drug, because this is drugs class. It can be a legal or illegal drug. I don't care what the take on it is, whether it's positive in favor of the drug, whether it's negative against the drug. That's really not the point. It's just got to be something related to a drug, some type of advertisement. It could be selling an actual drug, or it could be selling an idea that this pharmaceutical drug is bad, or this illegal drug is bad, you shouldn't take it. This illegal drug is good, you should take it. Any of those perspectives are fine. Somebody is selling you on a product or an idea. That makes it perfectly okay for this paper. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that every advertisement that you see is going to have something misleading in it. You need to find something specific that might be misleading. Let me show you one example of an advertisement that technically fits everything I said. So this is an advertisement for a drug called Celebrex. It's a painkiller. And what are they trying to sell you on in this ad? They're trying to sell you that if you are in pain, you're limited in what you can do. You can be more athletic and more sort of active than you were before when you were in a whole bunch of pain if you take Celebrex. When I look at this advertisement, I don't see anything in here that strikes me as too off the wall, as misleading, as hiding something glaringly obvious. Sometimes people don't write very strong papers because they pick an advertisement like this, maybe at the last minute, and they kind of say, well, all drugs have side effects, which is true. And they don't list any side effects on here. They just have some small font that over in the corner says, individual results may vary. That's not really a specific misleading thing. That's just, well, the drug is perfect and they don't talk about everything imperfect in this advertisement, therefore the advertisement is wrong. So when I look at this ad, I don't see anything too misleading, and I don't think you could write a very good paper based off of this advertisement. But I might be wrong. You could look at this and maybe something struck you as being just incredibly off the wall and just does not seem right at all. But let me show you some examples of some things that would probably lead to a good paper. Now, again, you could pick this advertisement, but there's a chance that your paper just won't be very strong. You might be able to write a C paper by saying, well, Celebrex has some side effects, and they're not in this ad. Okay, it's true. It's just not very strong. It's not highly specific. A little bit more specific, you see something like this, a dietary supplement talking about energy. It contains the ingredients coenzyme Q10, ginseng, and ginkgo, and it puts that right underneath this word energy right here. And I think what that's really implying is that those specific ingredients are the cause of this boundless energy you will have. So what I would do if I were to pick this as my advertisement is I would look up research on those ingredients and try and see, you know, do they talk a lot about all these huge amount of energy that a person might have, where if you put this together in this uptime, whatever it is, you know, you're going to be bouncing off the walls in up 24 hours doing all kinds of great stuff. So that's a little bit more specific. Clearly, they are implying that this product is going to give you a bunch of energy from these ingredients in particular. Here's another one. This is an advertisement. I've seen a lot more people recently write papers, some of them very good, looking at advertisements from law firms. Very often, these are going to be injury lawyers who are going to try and do pretty much whatever possible to make some medical treatment or drug look really, really bad. So there's a chance that you could get a pretty good paper off of an advertisement like this if you really looked into what are they trying to say about the relationship between children's painkillers and this particular disorder. Here's another one. Here's one against marijuana, obviously. This one lists a whole bunch of different things that could be wrong. It talks about the THC in marijuana in twice the content that it was 20 years ago. It's got 6 bullet points right here of things that are negative effects associated with marijuana use. You could pick any one of these and kind of say that this really seems to be overblown. So I'm going to look into, you know, is there really a problem, long-term problem related to marijuana? Based on some of the things that they're talking about right here. So that's one, just to kind of show that I'm not being completely one-sided. You can go in the other direction because there's a lot more research or a lot more attention recently being paid to the pro-legalization movement. Things like marijuana didn't ruin his career or life, sort of implying that if you use marijuana, it's not going to interfere with you living well into your early 20s at all or prevent you from being a famous Hollywood movie actor if you happen to be James Franco. There are a bunch of assumptions and other things that are kind of not being said but are being implied by this advertisement. And I think you could sort of do some research on, okay, are there negative impacts associated with marijuana with long-term use? And maybe just cherry picking one particular celebrity doesn't really change that. So yeah, you could definitely go with something like that. I'm not going to do too many more of these because, well, now that I've used these, you can't use them. You've got to find something that's similar to these. Again, really, there's a wide range of different things. There are so many advertisements that you could find. But that's kind of the vein of where you're going, of kind of where you should be headed. So that's the ad. And again, bring me ads, show them to me, we'll talk about them. The articles you have to find, article or articles. Again, you only have to find one, but very often people kind of, sometimes I've had students say, well, I've got these 3 articles, they're not great, but I think if I put them all together and use them all in my paper, I could make a pretty strong paper. And I've said, yes, go for it. So sometimes using a small number of articles is going to actually, in the long run, easier for you writing this paper than just trying to squeeze one paper that doesn't really fit the advertisement you found and you're really not sure how to go about writing this paper. But you've got to really only find one. You have to be able to use it to evaluate the ad. In other words, it has to directly address the point in the ad. Now, of course, you're not going to find an article that was designed just for that particular advertisement. But as I'll show you in a minute, if you decide you want to look at that last ad related to James Franco, you're going to have to find some article looking at marijuana usage and sort of long-term health, career success, and those kinds of things. So you're going to have to look up that kind of thing. The article has to be peer-reviewed primary source. Now, it can be very, very tricky to tell what that is because good articles aren't going to say they're peer-reviewed primary source articles. So let's talk about exactly what that means. A peer-reviewed primary source article is going to be published in a scientific journal. This is an article that was published in the journal Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior. It's not published on CNN, it's not something from Huffington Post, it's not something from Fox News, it's not even something from WebMD. It's not a press release from a doctor. Peer-reviewed means that it's a journal article that was reviewed by other scientists before it was allowed to be published. So it's not meant for the average person to read. It's meant for other scientists to look at. How can you tell? So those are a couple of ways you can tell it's peer-reviewed. How can you tell something is primary source? What does that mean? Primary source means that the authors who wrote the paper are the ones who actually did the research, and they're reporting for the first time on the research that they did. So how can you tell that? You are going to almost always, here's a good telltale sign, you are going to see what is called a methods section. It might have other names, like here it's material and methods, but it's basically a very long, drawn-out, step-by-step recipe of exactly how we did this particular bit of scientific research so that other scientists can replicate it. In addition to having a methods section, it will probably also have a results section. A results section where there's a whole bunch of statistics, numbers that kind of get at, okay, this hypothesis we had at the start of the study, is it supported by all these numbers or not? In something that's not a primary source publication, you're not going to have a large number of statistics like this. You might have a graph or two, something like that. I can even compare this primary source paper to what we call a review article. Now, a review article is not necessarily, there's not necessarily anything wrong with a review article, of course, but it's just not the right kind of article for this paper. How can you tell? You will notice in this review article, by me, of course, which is why I liked it, you are going to see plenty of references to other people's work. You're going to read me talk about other people's research and some of my research. But none of this, you're not going to see a methods section, you're not going to see a results section. You're not going to see, you know, really the nuts and bolts of one or two scientific findings like you would see in a peer-reviewed paper. In a peer-reviewed, sorry, this was peer-reviewed, in a primary source paper. So how do you get to one of these? The way that you get to one of these is you go to the library's website. I have that guide online to show you how to get here to the Find Articles section of the library website. I just want to point out a couple of really good databases you can use for this kind of research or for, you know, other things in other classes. Medline is a particularly good one. Medline gives you all the medical research that's out there, indexes that. The one that we're probably going to use, although you could use Medline for this assignment, is PSYC. When you go into PSYC, you can look up, as I have right here, marijuana and learning. Maybe we want to go after, maybe I've decided that I want to use that advertisement from before that said marijuana causes problems with learning. I want to look that up, and I've decided that something about that seems misleading. I can explain what that is in the paper, and so I'm going to do my research on marijuana and learning. That's cool. And I'm going to get, as it says here, 813 results, which is actually not as many as I thought I would if I'm just searching for all of the articles in psychology on marijuana and learning. But this very first one has the name Neural Correlates of Verbal Learning in Adolescent Alcohol and Marijuana Use. Maybe you don't know what all of those things mean, but verbal learning, adolescent alcohol and marijuana use, you probably have some sense of what that's about. So maybe you're thinking, all right, maybe I can go into this. Maybe this is a good source that I could use for my paper. You click on the title, and it's going to bring you to the abstract page, and there you can read about the research. If you decide that you want to get this paper, you would click up here, check for availability. You're going to see something that looks like link to full text. And it's going to take you to a page where hopefully, if everything goes well, you can just get a PDF of this particular article. And yes, in this case we can. Otherwise, what would have happened is it would have taken you to a page where it would have asked you if you wanted to order this article via interlibrary loan. You can, of course, do that, but you need to give yourself a good amount of time. So you couldn't do that with a couple of days before the paper is due. But in this particular case, we've lucked out. We can get a PDF of this particular article. And it certainly seems to look like a primary source peer-reviewed journal article. It's probably peer-reviewed because, again, we got it off of PsycInfo. We didn't get it just by Googling it. We didn't get it by just kind of like looking up people's blogs or whatever. And it's probably a primary source paper because, look, it's got a method section where they go into great detail on the participants, who was in the study, all of the other things that they use, the measures that they use, the way that they tested things. It's got a results section. So yeah, this right here is a primary source peer-reviewed article, so this is an article that you could use for your paper. So now that we've gone over the material that you need to gather to help you write your paper, here's a couple of other things about the paper. I want you to send me a topic email. The deadline for this is going to be in the syllabus and in the guide. The topic email is one sentence, but it's really got to be specific. In other words, you need to have done some homework by the time you send me this email. One sentence: I found this particular advertisement, I found this to be misleading in it, and here's the article that I found that I'm going to use to evaluate it. That's all I need to see. It's just a way that I can write you back and go, great, you're on the right track, this is going to be a great paper, or no, I don't think you've quite got the right source, or maybe I'm not sure about what's misleading, so you could write this paper but you'd end up getting a C. Let's think more about a way to get you a better grade on this paper. That's all. Don't stress the topic email. If it's a day or two late, it's okay. I want you to actually have some research done rather than just send me some email that's really got no information in it. The paper should be something like 2 to 4 pages, more on the 3 or 4 page side, actually. That's just what I see with typically what makes a very good paper. I don't have specific page requirements, so please do me a favor, just use regular font. You don't have to squeeze something into a specific page limit. Don't worry about any of that. I do need references. I don't want separate sections. Your paper does not need a title or an abstract. It doesn't need to be in chapters or anything. It's 4 pages long, but you do need to put references in APA style. Look up the guide, look up both guides that I provide for you on exactly how to do that, how to put APA style references into the text, and then you need a separate reference section in the back, just with 1 or 2. And you might say, okay, I can cite the article pretty well. That's not that hard. I can just Google APA style citing, and I can have a bunch of different guides online to help me cite something in APA style. What about the advertisement? My advice is always just do the best you can with the advertisement. I put in a couple of examples in the guide of how to cite a commercial, etc. If you've got something on YouTube, fantastic, put in a link there. But really, just do the best you can when you're citing the advertisement, because I acknowledge that that's kind of difficult to do. Lastly, let's talk about what actually will go into your grade. Number one, plagiarism. If you plagiarize, the reason I put that in there as number one is that can be the difference between an A paper and failing the class potentially, depending on how bad you do. Don't plagiarize. Don't borrow somebody else's paper who took the class a couple of years ago. Be careful about citing things. Make sure you cite anything that's not your own original idea. If you borrow somebody else's text, put it in quotation marks, although I don't recommend quotes for a paper that's this short. If you have any questions about any of this, how to cite, how to make sure that, you know, you basically keep your nose clean, come talk to me. The most important thing other than that is, did you do the assigned paper or not? Sometimes people hand in papers that are their opinion on medical marijuana. That's great, but that's not the paper that you're assigned right now. So what you need to do is find that advertisement, point out something specific about it that seems misleading, and then get an article. And you need to treat yourself like a judge in this case, not someone who hates this advertisement or is really anti this drug. If there's a particular drug that your grandmother had a terrible reaction on and you hate it, that's probably not a good idea for this paper if you can't be impartial. You need to come across like, well, here's something that seemed misleading about this particular advertisement, and here's some evidence that will be used to argue for and against it. That's really kind of the tone that you need to take. You need to be able to communicate, write well, concisely get your points across, and then build, basically, as I've said, to pointing out specifically what's misleading in the advertisement or what seems misleading about the advertisement. Talk about the article in enough detail where I as the reader could easily see how the article really answers the question that you had about the ad. And then you give me your conclusion. And then lastly, of course, grammar and spelling are going to be relevant. They're, not going to make or break your grade as much as the other stuff, but, it's important to be able to write and complete sentences, of course. So that's a little bit everything. I'm going to wrap up just inside 20 minutes. Again, please keep me posted as to how you're doing. Please let me, show me articles, advertisements, making sure it's clear, what it is you plan on doing. And I thank you for your time. And again, please keep in touch. Take care.